Hi everyone, and welcome to the Python Django crash course. So this crash course is going to be geared among those that have never used Django before, and for those that want to go ahead and get started quickly with Django and just immerse yourself into it. Of course, for those of you with a little bit more experience, okay, this may not be as useful for you, but maybe near the end of the crash course, there may be something of benefit to you. All right, so what we want to do is, first of all, we want to install Python. Now, you can head over to python.org here, and the reason that we need to install Python is because Django is based on Python itself. So it is a Python-based web framework. So essentially, Django, is a backend framework which is based on Python itself. All right. Now, you're more than welcome to head over to the djangowebsite.com, so djangoproject.com, and here you can read a little bit more about Django, some of the perks about it in terms of it being extremely fast, secure, and highly scalable. So essentially what you want to do is download Python, of course. So you can head over to python.org, you can head over to downloads, and you can download the latest version as you see fit. If I could give you some advice, that would be not to download the latest version. Now you may think that the latest version, of course, is the best version, but to ensure that you're free from any errors or any bugs, because sometimes there's glitches and whatnot, I'd recommend going down a little bit, and I would suggest that you download something such as Python 3.11.1. So that's the version that I'm using. So I'm using Python 3.11.1. And what I want you guys to do then is go ahead and look for this version in this table here. Don't worry, I will include all the links in the description below, so you can head onto this page easily. So for clarity here, I will include this link here in the description, along with the Django link here. So anything that you see in this course that's on a particular website, I will include in the description below. So once you're on this page here, you can scroll down and look for this table, which at the top of it says looking for a specific release. So you can choose Python 3.11.1, and then you want to click on download. All right, and you should see this nice looking icon here of this nice snake. And what you can do is scroll down to the bottom, and now you'll see another table here with a list of files. So I'll zoom in here for clarity. So what you want to do is go ahead and install the Python setup wizard onto your system. So I'd recommend, if you're using Windows, of course the recommended option is to download the Windows installer for 64-bit. Of course, if you're on macOS, you'll download it for macOS, as you can see here. Now just keep that in mind. So of course, if you're on Windows, this is the one you want to download based on the Windows installer. macOS, of course, you'll see it right here. Just one more thing I want to mention, if you are using Windows, so when you go ahead and set the startup wizard up, you'll see a check box that comes up that says add to python.exe or add Python to the path or something like that. You'll see a checkbox. Now make sure you click on that checkbox before you go ahead and install it. It will be very obvious. You'll see it as soon as you download the installer and start to set it up. One of the first things you'll see is this option that says install now, and then right at the bottom you'll see a checkbox. So just be sure to check that checkbox that says add python.exe to the path or add Python to the path. Very important, make sure you don't forget that. All right. Now, if you have installed, of course, Python onto your system, okay, what you can do is head on over to your terminal. If you're on Mac OS, if you are using Windows, you can just look for your command prompt and type cmd and open that up. And then what you want to do, you can just clear this up, and you want to just type in pip -- version. So you want to make sure that you have pip on your system, first of all. Okay, so you have pip, and then you want to type in Python -- version. Now, this is the most important part, because without Python, we can't use Django at all, because like I said, Django is based on the Python programming language. So we can see we have Python installed and pip installed. So make sure you have these two set up accordingly. All right, so we can close that for now. All right, so what we want to do now is we want to actually go ahead and get started. So we are going to use the Visual Studio Code text editor. So essentially, if you don't have Visual Studio Code, what I'll do is I'll include a link in the description below for you to go ahead and download it. Now, of course, you can use another text editor if you wish, if you prefer something such as Sublime Text or Atom. There's also good examples here, but we're going to be using Visual Studio Code. So again, like I said, I will include a link in the description below, which will allow you to download it. The process will be very simple. And of course, you can download it on Windows, Mac, or Linux. All right. Great. So once we have set everything up, what I'm going to do to start off with, I'm on my desktop here. We can see we've got no files or anything like that. What I prefer to do is create a normal folder on my desktop. So I like to right click and create a new folder, and I like to call it dev. So I always like to create a folder for all of my projects and then just set that up accordingly. So go ahead and create a folder on your desktop now. There are many ways to do this. This is just one way in which you can go ahead and do it. And the next thing that we want to do is we want to simply go ahead and open up our CMD. So if you're on macOS, you can open up your terminal, and we want to open this up. Now on Windows, you can type CLS. If you are on Mac, I believe the command would be clear. So just keep that in mind. So on Windows, you'll type CLS, and on macOS, I believe it will be clear to clear your terminal. The next thing that you want to do is you want to head on over to this particular folder that we have here. So you can say CD, and first you need to go to the desktop so that you're here on this part here, and then you want to add in a / and then add in dev. So CD stands for change directory. So this means we want to move from our current location here, which is in our C drive, users, and in my case Arno, and I want to change the directory and head on over to desktop dev. So try to see it as a pass of top down to bottom in files, so from the top to the bottom, and we can press enter. So now we can see we are within this folder. Great, so let's clear this up. Now the first thing that we want to do is we want to install the package for creating virtual environments in Django. So to do that, you would need to say pip install virtual env. Okay, now this virtual env package will allow us to go ahead and create virtual environments for our Django application. Now do keep in mind, when you are installing packages, okay, via pip here, you need to ensure that you always install these packages in a virtual environment. Now, it's okay to install virtual env globally because there's no other way to set up virtual environments without setting it globally, but I will get to this point in further detail shortly. So you want to install virtual env onto your system globally. There we go, perfect. So let's clear this up so we can see it was installed. The next thing that we want to do is now we want to create a virtual environment. So a virtual environment is going to house all of our packages and dependencies. So what you want to do is you want to go ahead and type in virtual env. So now we're making use of that virtual env package we used, and we want to create a virtual environment. So now what you can do is add in a custom name. So I'm calling it venv. You can call it env, you can call it my venv, and these all stand for virtual environment, etc. So I'm going to keep it simple and say venv and press enter. Okay, so let's go ahead and create that. So make sure you're in your dev folder, very important. So this will house both our Django project and our virtual environment folder, etc. So let's just wait for that to be created. Usually it's relatively fast, and there we go, pretty fast. And now what you want to do is you want to activate your virtual environment. Now to do this, you can say venv /scripts /activate. And you can see now that our virtual environment has been activated. So we can see here within the parentheses here that we are currently within it. Now what you can do with your command prompt, so if you're using Windows, if you want to make it bigger, you can right click, go to properties, and you can just set this up if you wish to make it a bit bigger for you if you want to see it a bit clearer. So for your sake, I'm also going to make it bigger so it's a bit more readable for you guys. So let's clear. So as you can see here, we are within our virtual environment here, and whenever you install packages via pip, from now on you need to install it in the virtual environment in the virtual environment folder. So once you're in it. Now, like I said, when we ran pip install virtual env, it's globally on our system. This is now going to be locally in the virtual environment. So now what we want to do is we want to install Django. So we're going to say pip install Django. Now make sure you're in the virtual environment folder, make sure it's active. Now for you, it's going to show you your custom name. So whatever you called your virtual environment, it will show here. So if you called it env or my env, that will be the name here. So now let's install Django within our virtual environment. So this does take a while. So let's just give it a moment to install and set up. Okay, there we go. All right, so I'm just going to wait for this to be installed. Now, as you can see here, Django also goes ahead and adds in additional packages along with it, such as SQL parse, tzdata, ASCII Github, I believe that's how it's pronounced. I don't know how to pronounce that, along with Django. So just keep that in mind. Sometimes you install one package and it installs all these sub packages along with it as well. All right, perfect. So we can see Django was installed. So we can type CLS, clear this up, And what you're going to do is type in pip list. So this is a very useful command to see if our packages are within our virtual environment. So here we can see Django, pip, setup tools, SQL parse, easy data wheel. Great, so we've got everything installed here perfectly. Now that we have Django installed, we can actually go ahead and create a Django project. Now this is what we want to do. So it's best to stay in your virtual environment. You shouldn't really leave it unless you actually need to, but if you want to deactivate it, you can say venv /scripts /deactivate. Okay, this will deactivate it. Now, of course, if we use the Visual Studio Code terminal, which we're going to use in just a moment, you need to just say deactivate, okay? But if you're using the command prompt like me, you need to say explicitly the path, so venv scripts deactivate, and if we want to activate it again, you can just say activate, like that. Okay, very simple. Okay, so now we're within our virtual environment. Now what I want us to do is create a Django project. So we can say Django-admin start project. Now there's many ways to do this, and what you want to do then is name your Django project. So I'm going to call mine Django what can we say, no, I'm just going to change it to, I'm going to call my project Elevate. Okay, so give it a unique name, so call your project something cool. So I'm just going to say Elevate. I want it to say Django something, but let's make it a bit more interesting. So we can see our project was created. So if you see this line indents, that means it was created. Now you can continue to use the command prompt if you wish, but I want to introduce you to the terminal in VS Code. So the choice is yours. If you want to continue this way, that's more than fine. So I'm going to close this for now. And if we open this folder here, this dev folder, we can now see we have our Django project called Elevate here, and I also have my virtual environment folder here as well. So I like to keep it nice and separate. Next thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and open up Visual Studio Code. So go ahead and do that. Okay, so it does take a moment. Right, so automatically it should already show your project directory here. So if not, if you don't see your project, you can just, let me close this. You can go to File, you can go to Open Folder, and you want to go to your desktop and then choose your dev directory here and select that folder. And then it will now show what you see here. Okay, right. Now the next thing that we want to do is we want to configure our Python interpreter. So what you can do is you can just minimize everything, head on to your dev folder, okay, click in your virtual environment, and we need this path here. So what you can do is head on to your application, and I want you to press Control Shift and P on your keyboard. So Control Shift and P, so Control Shift P, and then you want to choose Python Select Interpreter. Now it may automatically be synced for you, but if it isn't, you can just go ahead and click enter interpreter path, and you want to enter in the path to your interpreter here. So what we can do is go ahead and copy that URL here, and you want to paste that in like so, and press enter. So now if you press Control Shift and P again, and you head over to select interpreter, we can now see it has been indeed selected. All right, so just something important to note. So again, remember, enter your interpreter path, copy it from your virtual environment at the top there, enter that in and press enter. All right, so that's what you're going to need to do there. So now what we want to do is we want to open Visual Studio Code's terminal. So here you'll see a few options on the top. So you want to choose the second one, which is toggle panel. And you'll see it will it will be synced for us. Our virtual environment here will be active within it here. Now, if for some reason you do not see it, okay, what you can do is just say clear here, and you can just say venv /scripts /activate, and that's only if you don't see this virtual environment active here. Right, so for your first time, you may see this debug console obstructing the view. So all you just want to do is push this away. So you now have that in clarity here. Now, the next thing that you want to do is you want to cd into Elevate, which is our project. So we can say cd Elevate. All right, and you can clear that up. All right, so make sure you've got your structure accordingly set. Now, the next thing that you want to do is you want to head over to Elevate itself, and I just want to go over some of the files that we have here. So within Elevate, we have a subfolder called Elevate as well. Now, this is going to house a few files here. So we have our init.py file, asgi.py file, settings.py file, urls.py, and wsgi.py file. Now, the important file to keep in mind is our settings.py file. So this is very important. So we're going to be using the settings.py file if we were to set our debug configuration to true or false. So by adding it to true, if we are busy working in development and we have any errors, for example, by setting debug to true, it's going to show us and trace all those errors that we have for our application. So it's very useful to keep debugged equal to true in development mode. However, in production, when you deploy your website, it's very dangerous, so you need to set it to false when you are deploying your application. So something important to note. Every Django application that you create will come with its own secret key, and this is one of the things that you can go ahead and add into your environment variables. So environment variables are something that you can make use of to store all of your sensitive data, such as API keys and everything secure. I will add in a video in the description below of environment variables, so that's another topic you can look at if you want to store your data securely. So I have a few videos on that, I believe, which I'll include in the description below. Additionally, we can see here that we have a set of installed apps. So by default, Django goes ahead and creates a few mini apps, you could say, for our Django application in terms of an admin page, an authentication app, content types, session apps, messages apps, and also based on static files. We can also see here we have some default middleware in place. A lot of it is security based, such as middleware in terms of click jacking, also for authentication, CSRF protection, etc. So we can see Django is a very secure framework built in. Additionally, you can also set templates as well. So if you want to render HTML pages, you can set your templates here. This would be known as the project level. We also have app level, so something that we will touch on soon enough. Okay, we can also set in a database here. So as we can see, by default, we're using a SQLite database. So Django by itself comes with a SQLite database. So to generate it, we need to run our server for the first time, and then it will generate, and I will go through that with you. Now you can sort this out for another database, such as a Postgres database or MySQL database. So those would be more suitable for a production-based environment. If you are doing local testing, etc., then this SQLite database is perfectly fine. You wouldn't need to change it. Additionally, we can also see we have some validators in place. So what I can do is click this, close this Explorer, and I can minimize this debug console so you can see a bit clearer. So we can also see the validators that are set in place for our username and password authenticators. Okay, we can also see we have a default static URL, so you'll also be able to configure your static files with Django. So if you plan on making use of CSS files, JavaScript files, or media files such as user uploaded images, etc., you can go ahead and set up those static files as well. So that's the topic to also look into. All right, so you can see the settings.py file is really good for configuring all the basics. Next, we have our urls.py file. So as you can see here, we have a urls.py file with only one URL, and that is sent to the route of our admin page. Now we can go ahead and configure as many URLs as we wish for our application. Now, by default, we only have the one, which is our admin page. All right, we also have the asgi.py file and the wsgi.py file, so we won't go into too much detail with these. Now, there is some more information in terms of these comments here, so this is known as a comment, and you can see here we have some links here that you can go ahead and click on if you want to read more about the wsgi.py and the asgi.py file if you want to go ahead and read more about that. All right. We also have the init.py file, but we won't go into too much detail there. It's a little bit involved for a crash course. Next, we have the management.py file. Now, this is very important to learn, especially if you're just starting out with Django. So with the management.py file, you effectively want to use this as your root for it's pretty much your command center, you could say. So we can see it's Django's command line utility for admin tasks. So generally, whenever you want to run commands, such as to run your server in Django, if you want to make your migrations, create your super user, you're going to want to invoke this manage.py file. Now, remember, it's very important not to mess with it or delete it. So you could say this is the whole, you could say this is the core of running commands with your Django application, the manage.py file. Very important. So it's best to leave this alone and not really mess around with it too much. So just keep that in mind. I just want to touch on again with the wsgi.py file here. So a lot of the time when we want to deploy our applications, this wsgi.py file will come in great handy here, because usually, for example, if we want to deploy an application, for example, to render, we need to set up our wsgi path, and we're going to have to link that with gunicorn in order to communicate with external web servers on another, you could say, cloud-based platforms such as Heroku, Render, Railway, etc. All right. Now, another thing about ASGI, which I can mention, is if you're looking into asynchronous development or programming, that's something that you can go ahead and read on a little bit more about. All right, so I think that's it in terms of files. I think I've gone on a little bit too long. And of course, as we can see here, we have a separate folder for our virtual environment here as well. Now, and this is our Django project. Remember, each Django project that you create will create a subfolder, which is right here, which is going to house important information. All right, so what we can do now is just move this up. So you can move your VS Code terminal up here if you wish. And here we can just click this up, and you want to say Python manage.py. So you can see here, we're invoking manage.py. And what you want to say now is run server, and this will allow us to go ahead and run the development server of Django in place here. So we can see the server started, and you can access it at the following URL. So you can literally follow the link here. We're using Django 4.2, and you can see as soon as we ran our server, it generated a SQLite file right here. So now we have the SQLite database in place for us, so we can now go ahead and manage and store data accordingly. Now, if you scroll up here, you'll see here that it says you have 18 unapplied migrations. So this is something we'll touch on in just a moment. But for the meantime, what I want you to do is head on over to this link. And an easy way to do it is to just type in the following. So this is the localhost, so 127.0.0.1 : 8000. And once you press enter there, you'll be able to see this nice page here which says the install worked successfully. Congratulations. And this indicates that we have set up our Django project successfully and that we have no issues or whatnot, and everything is working as it should. So if you see this page, well done. This is what we need to get started. All right. Okay, so what I wanted to mention earlier on, if we move on up, it says we have 18 unapplied migrations, and it says your project may not work until you apply the migrations for apps, admin, or content type sessions. Now, you'll probably recognize this if you head on to settings.py, and we can see these are the default apps that we have. So all of these apps have a unique set of functionalities. So like I said, the admin app here is used for setting up all the admin functionalities and details. We also have the auth app, which is responsible for creating users and also for authentication, password handling, etc. Now, all of these apps that are set here, okay, have their own unique database files, okay, and we need to migrate these database files accordingly with our SQLite database. We need to make these migrations for these apps. So each of these apps has their unique database files that need to be migrated. Now we can also create our unique app as well if we wish, and then we would need to migrate it as well. But these are the default apps that we need to go ahead and migrate in order to move on ahead and remove this message and apply the migrations, okay? Now, you're probably wondering, okay, I'm using the term apps a lot. What does this actually mean? So treat a Django app as a small, you could say, how can I say it, as a small app or a mini project, you could say, okay, that has its own unique set of custom functionality. So for example, we have admin, auth, and all of these apps, do a certain function. Okay, so try to see Django as like the tree, and you can try and see the roots as these apps. So each of these are a part of the roots, or the branches, you could say, or the leaves, and Django is the tree, and the leaves, for example, are the apps, or something like that. So try and think of an analogy here to make sense of it, in which it will make it easier for you to understand. So that's how you can see apps. So each app has its own unique function related to the whole core of Django itself. Each person has their own task to fulfill and function. So that's what an app is. Now Django has this whole set of default apps, and a good thing is we can also create our own apps with our own functionalities. Okay, so as we can see here, we have the default database files for these apps that we need to migrate for our SQLite database. So here in your debug console in your terminal, you can just press Control-C, and that will stop the terminal. And then you can just type CLS. I believe you can also type CLS here. And what you want to do is you want to migrate all those migrations to your database. So you can just say Python manage.py migrate, and this will make all those migrations accordingly. There we go. So we can see all of those database files pertaining to these apps have been migrated to our database. Perfect. Now, if you run your server again, you can say Python manage manage.py run server. So if you run this again, you'll see that you don't get that message anymore, and you can just go ahead and access your application at the following URL, which is still the same. Okay, so that's how you can go ahead and set that up. Now, the next thing I want us to do is understand the concept of URL. So I'm just going to say Control-C, stop the server, and you want to head over to your urls.py file. Now, I know all of you know what a urls.py file is. You know what a URL is, then you'll understand the concept of urls.py. Now, this is a comment here. So comments here are usually used to guide us and provide us with information. Now, it's kind of blocking the URL here. So I just want to highlight this and delete it, so you can delete it. Now, this isn't code that will be run or compiled. You can just go ahead and delete this. Now, as you can see, we only have one URL here, and that is admin/. Now, the first argument that we have here is typically our route name here. Now, if we want to head over to the Django admin page, we can absolutely do that. We just need to turn on our server. So you want to run python manage.py, and you want to type in admin/, or you can just type in /admin within your URL. So if you are on your Django site here, okay, you can literally just go ahead and put in /admin, and you'll be redirected to the admin page right here. So here is the Django admin where you can go ahead and administer your Django website. To actually access it, you would need to create a super user, and this super user will be able to manage your models and also delete objects, etc. But we will get onto that. Now, if you're using Django 4.2, you'll notice that it has updated the Django admin page slightly. You'll now be able to change the color fonts here, change the code, and you can just modify it as you see fit. Of course, the dark theme is the best. Now, what we can also do is we can also create a super user to actually access this admin page. So what you can do is you can just go ahead and clear your terminal, press Control-C, and you want to say python manage.py. Create super user. Okay, and you can go ahead and do that. Now, do keep in mind that you don't always need to use manage.py for every command. Some commands you can kind of bypass it, but in this case we do need to use it. And here it's going to by default set a username. Usually it will be set to the user on your computer. So you can change this if you want to admin or something like that. So I'm just going to say admin. I'm going to change it. If you want to leave it as the suggested, you can just press enter, but if you don't, you can just add in something. The email address is optional, so you can skip it. So for anything you want to skip, you can just press enter on your keyboard. And then a password here, we need to add that in. Okay, just keep in mind you won't see it, but Django will know what you're typing in. There we go. So we can now see the super user is created successfully, and essentially your super user is your admin user. Now we can clear this up and we can run our server. So python manage.py run server. Go ahead and press enter and run your server. And now when we head over to the admin page, we'll be able to head onto it. So here we're on the admin page, as you can see here. Now, something I wanted to mention, you can also just add in admin like so. So if you're wondering about this trailing slash right here, so let me go back to localhost here. Now what you can do is you always need to add in at least a / here. And then what you need to do is add in that route name. So you can add admin / at the end. You'll always begin with a /. You can say admin / like that, and it will take you to the admin page accordingly. So just keep that in mind, okay? Now what you can do is go ahead and enter in your credentials accordingly. Right, so once you've entered in your credentials for your admin user or your super user to be clear, you can go ahead and log in. And now we are in the Django admin page here. So like I said, you can go ahead and do something. You can add, change. So typically here you would manage your users. So you can go to users here and we can see we have one user, that is the admin user. And we can see that is a member of staff. So we can click on this admin user. And as you can see here, you can add in a first name, a last name, email address. And here we have a few permissions. So active status as user is an active user. If the user is a member of staff, and if the user is a super user. So usually the super user part is if you are the lead admin or administrator, and the staff status is just like if you're a supervisor or something. So the staff can be treated as maybe a supervisor, and the super user can be seen as a manager of sorts. You can also add to groups, so you can add users to your groups, set them to, you can also assign user permissions, what they can and cannot do, and you can set this up. So if you don't want certain users not to be certain super users, you could say, or staff users to be able to do certain actions, you can limit that or set that up. So you can see here, can add group, can add log entry, etc. We can also see the last login time, when they last joined, just a bit of admin information here. Now we will get into this later on. So what we want to do is now log out. So here you can also change the password, view your site. Now if you click on view site here, it's going to take you to your application right here. So it's going to take you to the home page, which will be seen at the default local host. So we can get on back. And yeah, you can also change the password, log out, change the theme here if you wish. But generally, this is the Django admin page. So whenever you decide to go ahead and create models, or if you decide to manage your objects, you'll be able to manage it here. So you can add in objects, delete objects, etc. So you can really do quite a lot with Django admin. It's a very helpful tool to make use of. So let's go ahead and log out. You can click log out, and there we go, we're logged out, and we can just head on over back to the URL that we had in the beginning and head on back to the local host. Go ahead and refresh just to make sure. All right, so that's the Django admin for you. So a very helpful tool. All right, so what we want to do is we actually want to get stuck in and create and configure our own app. So as we can see here, we went ahead in settings and made our migrations for our apps, and each of these apps have their own task or unique set of functionalities they need to achieve. Now what we want to do is we want to actually go ahead and create our own app. So let's close all of this up, and we're going to just clear this up and stop. All right, so let's go ahead and create our app. So we need to go ahead and say Django-admin start app and give your app a name. I'm going to call this, let's say, links. So that's my app, it's called links. Okay, all right, there we go. So we can clear this up now. And if you head on over to your Django project, you can now see that we have our Django app called links here. So this is our app links, okay. Now we can see we have a whole set of new files here. So we have our init.py file, our admin.py file, apps.py, models.py, test.py, and views.py. So let's go through this. We also have a migrations folder, but we'll only get onto that when we move on to our model. So we'll start off with our admin.py file. So here is where we can register our models. So once we create a model here, and essentially with our Django models is where we actually create, you could say, a model based on a class, and this class is going to be a blueprint. So for example, if we want to store data about a car, or data about a particular user or set of users or employees, we would create a class such as employee and add in various attributes or fields such as first name, last name, etc. Then we will create the model, and in order to see it in our admin page, we need to register it on the admin.py page. This is what this is for. Additionally, we have apps.py and init.py. I won't go into too much detail here. I don't want to confuse you guys, especially if it's your first time in Django. We also have test.py here. So if you want to create unique test cases, test your code, test your application, see how it's going. So usually this will be very useful, especially if you are working in the industry when you want to do test cases. Also have our views.py file here. So this is something also that you can make use of. So Django uses the MVT architecture. So most backend frameworks use MVC. So Django uses model view templates. And of course, in many other applications or web frameworks, you'd use the model view controller, I believe. Okay, so here we can create our view. So we'll create function-based views, and we can either return based on our HTML templates, which we can render, or what we can do is we can also go ahead and return HTTP responses. That's where we can all set this up here. So essentially in our views.py is where we set up the functionality essentially for our backend. So all the backend logic goes into our views.py file. Now, generally best practices would be to also create a urls.py file here and connect it to our main urls.py file. So essentially in Elevate here, we have this urls.py file here. Now, usually this is for the main overall project, and you should only really have one here, and that is your admin.py file, unless you install other packages which tell you otherwise. And what you want to do is typically whenever you create a new app, of course, you would have functionality for this app in terms of your views, your models. It's best practice to create a urls.py file here in your app here in whichever app you create and create your own URLs there. Okay. Now, to configure this app here, we need to set it up in our settings.py file. Now, that's easy. You can head over to your project, head over to settings.py, and here under apps, we want to add in our new app. So our app in this case was called links. So you need to put in links. And Django is very sensitive, so make sure you add in a comma at the end there, very important. So this is how you can configure your app as well. So it's now part of installed apps. Now, we won't be able to migrate anything because what we would need to do is create a model and then add some migrations, and they will sit here before we send it to our database. So for now, we can just simply run our server. So you can say python manage.py run server, and we just run this command to ensure that we configured our app correctly. Because if there's any errors, what's going to happen is that this will break, and we can go ahead and just refresh just to double check. All right, so we're perfectly good. Great, so that's done. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to configure our urls.py file. So essentially we can close this, we can Control-C, close that. And what you want to do first of all is head over to your app and you want to create a urls.py file. So you can right click in your folder here on your folder, say new file, and say urls.py. All right, so here's our urls.py file. Now, in order to actually add in the correct logic here for urls.py, you need to open up your main urls.py here for your project, and you need to use a certain markup. So whenever you create a URL, you need to use the path function, which is here. Now, this is something that is imported from Django URLs, and this is something that you need. The Django contrib import admin part here is for our admin URL, so we're not going to need this. And whenever we create our URLs, we need to put them in a list, which is known as URL patterns. So we need to borrow some of this markup here first. So what we can do is copy everything here, and you want to paste it in your links in your app urls.py file. And you want to remove this pass here, you don't need that. And this is all you need to actually begin. Now, essentially what's going to happen is we're going to create our URLs, and our URLs will be linking to our view. So we have that view logic in place as well. So what you're going to have to do here is import your view. So we can say from, and we're saying dot because we're in the same directory, and you can see we can pick the necessary file. And what we want to do is pick our views. And essentially what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to say import views. So you're going to say from dot, and you're going to say import views. So that's how you can go ahead and import your views, okay, within your urls.py file. All right, now what we want to do now is we want to override this existing page here that we have. We want to change this up. So what we're going to have to do is create a new URL here, and since we don't have any routes here or any route names, it's just at the default localhost. What you want to do is you want to create your own path. So we're going to create a function here called based on the path, and this will help us to build a URL. Now we can take in 3 arguments here. 2 will be mandatory. So let's zoom in here. So I'm just going to move this bit down for you guys so you can see. So the first argument you're going to want to take is you want to add in your route name. Now it's best to keep it as empty string for the home page, and in a comma, and now we need to put in our view. So we need to now create a view. So you can head over to Explorer, move views, you can move it here to the right, and now we want to create our own view. So we can just create a function. So I'm going to say def, and I'm going to say home, and you can pass in a request object if you wish. Now we only need this request object if we want to render a template, so an index.html page, but all we want to do is we want to go ahead and return a HTTP response, something very simple. So to do that, we can remove this comment. So this is known as a comment. So here we can just say from django.http import HTTP response. And now what we can do here in our view is we can say return HTTP response, and in parentheses we can just say hello world, something very simple. Okay, so this is how we can create a view. Okay, so this is going to return a HTTP response on a blank white page here, and what we need to do is connect this view to our URL. Okay, and in our URL here, in our view, we can reference views here now. So we're going to say views dot, and now we can reference that particular function name, which was home. We can say home. And for clarity, I always like to add in an extra argument here, and that is name equals, and we're just going to leave it as an empty string here. I always set it as double quotes as well. The choice is yours as to how you want to do it. And remember to always add in a comma at the end there, just for clarity, to ensure you don't have any errors or whatnot. All right. Now, this is not going to work just yet, because what we need to do essentially is we need to link this URLs here, this urls.py file in our app, to our upper level, which is in our main project URLs. We need to call it here. Now, to do that, we need to use an include function to tell Django, okay, I want to, the main urls.py file here in my Elevate project to include all the URLs from this links app here. So I want to include all the URLs in this urls.py file from my links app. So to do that in your project here, you can just go down and say pass, and you can leave that as an empty string. And you want to import now the include function, and you can say include, and within parentheses, in quotes, you can just put in your app name. So the app name here is links. So you can put that here. So links dot, and you want to reference URLs here. You just want to say .urls. You don't want to say anything else. And then add in your comma at the end there. So you can close this up now. And I'm just going to zoom out here for clarity, and we can move that up. And now what you want to do is you want to go ahead and run your server again. So go ahead and do that. There we go. And now if you refresh your page now, you can see it says hello world. So the reason for this is now we have gone ahead in our URLs, and now we're setting the home page here based on the following view, and the route name won't be anything. You can see earlier when we had admin, we had to put admin in the URL, but by default, if we are just leaving this as an empty string here, the route name, it's automatically going to know that it's going to be for the home page itself. All right. So that's how you can modify and manipulate URLs and how you can create views simply. All right. So that's how you can go ahead and do just that. Now, the next thing that I want to show you is how you can set up your templates. So there are two ways to do this. Let me close this up. So let's set this up. So there's two ways to do it. The first way is to set it up at the project level. So you can head over to settings.py, and what you can see here is templates here, and you can use DIRs here to set up your templates if you want to go ahead and configure it with your HTML templates here. Now, this is at the project level. Now, I don't really like to do it this way, okay? I feel that the best way for you to do it is to do it at the app level, so that's the way I'm going to show you. So you start off right, because long term, if you're going to be using Django a lot, it would be in your interest to use app level templates, okay? So I'm quite a big advocate for that. So what you can do to set that up is you want to head over to your app here. So in this case, we have links, and I just want to zoom in here to make it clearer for you. And what you want to do is, first of all, stop your server. Okay. And in your app here, you want to right click and say new folder and call this templates. So here we are within templates, and now this is where you can create your HTML files. So you can add all your HTML files here, such as homepage.html, index.html, all of that. Now, to ensure you don't have namespace errors, it's always safer to create a subfolder in templates here with the name of links. Now, technically, you can just create your HTML files in here easily, because Django will automatically, by default in its nature, recognize the templates folder. So when you reference your index.html files, you don't need to go into such detail. So anyway, best practice, right click on templates, say new folder, and you want to create a subfolder with the exact same name of app. So when you're creating a bigger Django app, you'll have multiple apps. So each time you are setting a templates folder in that particular app, always make sure that you go ahead and follow the same structure. So if you have an app called links, and you want to use templates, create the templates folder, and then within templates, you want to create another folder with the same name of that app. So if you have another app called payment, that means, and you want to deal with templates for payment, you're going to have payment, templates folder, and then you're going to create a subfolder called payment. If you have another app called cart, you're going to say cart as your app, templates, and then in templates a subfolder called cart. So that's the structure you should follow. So here I'm going to call it this links because that is part of the app, and you can right click here in links, say new file, and I'm going to call this index.html. Now this is usually the index.html is usually the core and the front page of your application. So this is usually what you see. And in here, I'm just going to say h1 hello world. So something very simple here. So you can go ahead and add that in. And now what you need to do is head on over to your views, and instead of returning a HTTP response, we're going to use this request object to render our index.html page. So essentially what we can do is remove this, and you want to say return render and pass in the request object, and here in quotes, okay, you want to look at your structure here. So Django will automatically remember no templates, so you don't need to worry about that. So you can skip on to links. So here you can say links / and click on links, and you can see you have index.html. Now it is case sensitive, so you need to be exact. So here you can just say index.html. Right, and that's how you can go ahead and render it. Now it's automatically going to be passed and connected to your URL, so you can see your URL here. So your pass here at your home page is automatically going to pick up this template because we configured it in our view. So you can see here really with Django, views is really everything. So all your logic, everything you configure, okay, will always be set correctly to your pass as long as you set it up right. So it's still going to home in and look at the cart at the home view accordingly, and you're going to see the result on the home page essentially. Right, so what we can do is just run the server now. Okay, so go ahead and do that. Right, now if you go ahead and refresh on your page, you see it says hello world. So we've now got that HTML markup. If you want to double check that you're actually using HTML, just remember the tags were h1 hello world. And what you can do is in your application here, you can right click and say view page source. And here you can actually see that HTML being rendered. So Django rendering templates for us is looking quite good. All right, so that's how you can go ahead and set up your templates essentially. So let's zoom out here. All right, so that's how you can go ahead and do that. So let's close everything up. All right, so we've now covered URLs, we've covered views, we've covered templates. So now what we want to do is we want to go ahead and focus on models. So as we can see here, we have our app, and now we want to go to models. And what we're going to do is create our own model here. So whenever we create a model, it will be based on a class. So we'll have its own class name. So what we can do is stop our server and let's create our model. So this is going to be quite long, so let's get started. So let's say we want to create a simple blog site. So a good name for a individual blog post would be article. So we can say, give it the class name of article. So I'm going to say class article. And in here, I'm going to pass in models.model. So this is the default that we need for creating a class. So like I said before, this is going to determine the class here for your model. The class name is going to kind of be similar to the blueprint of what you want to build. So if you have an article here, typically you would have attributes or fields such as the title of the article, the description, when it was created at. Now, what you can also do, for example, is have something known as class person or class human, and then the attributes would be things such as eyes, height, race, complexion, nationality, something like that. Okay, so you could also have class for the car. So remember, whatever you stipulate here as your model, essentially your class name here is going to be the blueprint for what you're aiming to manage. This can also be something like class record, and if it's called class record, then that would mean you're probably looking to store information on somebody's information in terms of their name, their email, their occupation, etc. So that's how you can go ahead and understand the concept of models. So here for article, what are we probably going to need? Okay, we'll need a title. So that would be an attribute or a field. And then you want to say models.char field. So this is going to allow us to use letters and strings. And now you can set a max length. So you can set this to however long you think the title will be, and it will be in characters. So 255 characters, that's fine. Right, now the next attribute, so let's press enter here. So it's always best to leave a space in between your fields or your attributes. So next it will be description. And I'm going to say models.text field and enter empty parentheses. The next thing that we want to use is created at. So I'm going to say created at. So when was this blog post or article created or posted? So I'm going to say models dot. And we're going to use something special called date time field. So essentially these can be seen as data types, you could say. So a char field, text field, date time field, etc. And within here, we're going to say auto, and we can say auto underscore now underscore add and set that to true. So basically it was this field here. We're not going to enter in that field. So we're going to set it to automatically add. So whenever we create a object, okay, it's going to automatically create this record every time. So this is not something we manage ourselves. The only thing that we'll manually enter is the title and the description for the article per se. Okay, so this is all we need for a very simple model. You can add more. There is something extra I do want to show you, but I first want to show you how you can register this on your Django admin page. So that's what we're going to have to deal with. So what you want to do now is, so once you've created your model, okay, you'll see here we have a migrations folder within our app here, so links. So here is where we'll see the migration for this model. So essentially we cannot just go ahead and say migrate. So here in the terminal, let's move this up, we need to say python manage.py make migration. So this make migrations command is going to prepare our migrations before we can deploy it and send it to our SQLite database, essentially. So you want to make migration. So this means we're preparing this model, and we can see it created a model in our app links migration 001 underscore initial pi. So here, if you look in your editor, you can see under migrations here, we have 0001 underscore initial pi right here. And we can see that it was created. So if you open this up here, we can see our migrations. They all prepared to be sent to our SQLite database here. So we can see the ID. So by default with Django, so for those of you that are SQL enthusiasts, so by default, it's going to already set an ID for us. That's one of the good things with Django models. So we don't literally need to put in an ID field. It will automatically be added. And the ones that we added, as we can see here, title, description, and created at. Now, what we need to do now is push this to our database. So what you need to do is you need to migrate this migration here. So it's prepared now. So what we can do is clear this up, and we can say python manage.py, and we can say migrate. So this is going to go ahead and migrate these migrations to our database. And there we go. So it's been sent. Perfect. And what we can do now is head on to our admin page. So here on the left, we need to go to admin.py. And here in admin.py, we want to register our model. So essentially what we need to do is look at the model name. So it's called article. Now keep in mind that it's in the same directory. So admin and models, it's in the same directory. So all we need to do is we need to say from dot, okay. And what we need to say is we need to go ahead and say from models import, and then you want to refer to that class name, which is article in my case, so article, and then you want to register the model. And the whole point of registering the model is so that we can see it in the admin page. So essentially admin.py is going to correlate to our admin page. So we can use the default function that's been included here for us, and we can say admin.site.register, and you want to put in the name of your model, so in this case article, like so, and you can add that in. Now what we need to do now is we can just run our server. So you want to say python manage.py run server. Okay, and the reason, some of you are probably wondering, why am I sometimes zooming in and out? And the reason for that is, for example, if we're dealing with the models, for example, I need to scroll down and just want to make it easier for you to read as we work on the situation. All right, so what you can do essentially now is head on to your Django admin page. All right, and I'm just going to put in /admin, enter in your credentials. So you want to go ahead and enter that in. So I'm just going to say admin and my password. Okay, and now we can see we have our models registered. So we can see we have our app now called links, and we have that model here called articles. Now, by default, Django is going to add an S on your class name every time, so by default. So you can click on articles here, and now we can see we have the ability in our admin page to go ahead and add an article as we see fit. So let me give you a test here, a test run. So the title is going to be, I'm going to say studying code, Python is the best. So something simple, and we can go ahead and save, or we can say save and add another, or save and continue editing. We have a few options here in Django So we can save this, and this is essentially an object. So we've created an object called article object 1. Now this doesn't look very nice. Okay, we can actually improve this. So what we can do essentially is in our models.py here, models.py file here, what we can do is create a function. So first you want to stop your server for a moment. And here you want to just say def double underscore str for string, double underscore self. And what we're going to do is add in a colon, and we want to go ahead and override this model here, and we want to return something other than article object underscore 1. So you want to instead say something like return self.title. So we want to return the title instead of that object name, so it looks a bit nicer. So this is a very particular and helpful function you can use. So now rerun your server again after adding this. Make sure you've indented it correctly. It needs to be in line with your attributes here. So make sure, if I zoom out, that your structure is exactly as I show you here. And you may need to sign in again, maybe not. And we can see here it now says studying code. So that's the name of the article. So here we can list our articles here in terms of their title. Now you can also set this to dot description as you wish. So the dot part here is going to help to go ahead and look into the various attributes that we set for our particular model. Another thing I want to mention, if we head on back to, we can go up here to links, and we can actually click on Django admin. There we go. And let's say we want to change this name here. We don't want it to say articles. Let's say you want to change it to something else. So I wouldn't advise you to really change it. It's best to keep it as is. But what you can do is you can go ahead and override it as you wish. You would need to go into the meta attribute. So this is the default meta data. So just under indentation matters, so you may need to use tab quite often in your application. So just something important to bear in mind. And I always like to stop the server here when I do edit some code, because it does get quite annoying with throwing errors. So you want to say class meta, and just underneath it here, you just want to say verbose underscore name underscore plural. And what you want to do is set that to something that you prefer. So let's say you want to say blog posts, for example. You can then save that, run your server. So this will automatically be in sync according to the admin page. And what you can do is refresh now. And you can now see it says blog post. So you can really decide what you want to do and how you want to reference it. Now it will still say add article, because remember the class name is on article because we plan on adding articles, but it does in turn look a little bit cleaner if you are managing your application. Perhaps what you can also do is with your app name, try and give it something a bit more meaningful. So I just kept it something very standard, and it's set to blog. That's something you can add as well. Whenever you make an action or do something in your Django admin page, here under recent actions, it will show you what you've done. So if you delete something, for example, so if we go to blog post and delete this article, you can click on the check mark, go here to action and say delete, and you can say go, and it will just confirm. If you don't want to do it, you can go back. If you do, you can just say yes, and it will delete it. Now, if you go to your Django admin homepage here, it will show the action that you deleted an object called studying code article. Now we can always go ahead and create something else. So I'm going to say here, let's say Python for beginners, the best article ever, and save. Okay, so there we go. We can see we have another article there, and go back to the Django admin, and we can see we performed another action. So this is really a useful section here for us. All right. So there we go. So we've learned a little bit about models now. We've learned about how to register these models. And I just want to emphasize the fact that the reason that you're seeing this model here is because we registered it. If you remove register here, you will not see it in the Django admin. So just something important to go ahead and actually keep in mind. Now, what we can do now is log out, and I want us to head on back to our home page here. So it just says hello world, but let's say we want to render out that data that we have from our object onto our website here. So what we can do essentially, we can just close these up for now, and you want to go to your directory structure. And what I want to do first is head on to templates and index.html. And what I'm going to do here is just swap this out, and I just want to add in some decent HTML logic here. So before we continue, let's do that. So this is Explorer tab, you can toggle on and off, and that just helps to maximize the size of your editor here. And let's zoom in. Okay, we minimize this here as well. You can choose to keep the server on or off if you want. I'll just turn it off. And what we can do here is just add in the basic markup here. So don't mind me. Okay, I just want to add in a heading tag here. And within that, I want to set the title. So by setting the title, I'm just going to set my first, I'm going to say blog actually. My blog. Okay, that's fine. So just basic HTML markup here. And then here I'm going to say all of my posts. Okay, something simple. So you can go ahead and add in some markup as you see fit. And what we want to do is we want to then run our server, and we just want to see what it looks. So we're going to create something very simple. We're not going to put ourselves under stress. And let's refresh. Okay, all of my posts. And then what we can do is just put in a header, so a horizontal line actually just below that. So HR is a tag for adding a horizontal line. And here we're going to have all of our posts. So let's render that post that we do have. It's not going to look nice the first time, but we will style it so you get the idea. So we can open our views. And what we want to do now is we want to go ahead and return all that data from our database. So here at the top, you need to first import your model. So the model here is, we know it is called article. So we need to refer to it again here. So I'm going to say from .models import article, and now we'll be able to actually make use of that model. So let's stop the server, and what we can do here is we can simply go ahead and say articles equals article. So now we're referring to the model itself, and now we're going to perform our ORM. So we're going to do a query here. So we're going to say article.object objects. Oh, what happened there? Excuse me. Article.objects .all, and we're using the all method here because we want to select all of the objects. So you saw there we created one object, deleted it, and we only have one object left. So we want to select all the objects, or all the records you could say, from our database. And then we need to pass it through and render it on our index.html page here. So what you're going to have to do here is you're going to have to go ahead and create a context dictionary here. So we're going to say context, and remember objects, they will work in key value pairs. So here we need to add in our key. So we're going to refer to it as article, and the value here we can say articles. And the value here is going to be on articles here. So essentially the key is what we reference in our HTML here in the templates. So the value here is going to be set to all of the objects that we have. So all the objects is going to be stored in this variable of sorts here as the value. And to refer to all of those objects, we need to add in a key here. Now this name can differ. It doesn't matter what you call it here, because this is what we refer to in our index.html file. So to pass our objects to index.html, we need to pass it as a context dictionary here. So you can say context is equal to context, like so. And then you can pass this through in index.html. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to output this accordingly. So we can put it down here, and it needs to be as a for loop. So here, let me show you what we're going to do. If I zoom in here, what you're going to want to do is create a for loop. So you're going to say for. And remember, the for loop, the name that you give here can be anything. So we're going to loop through articles. So you can say article in, and what you refer to in is important because you need to refer to the key that you stated here, which is articles, and that's going to refer to this. And what you want to do then is you want to just say at the end for. And for, so you're going to add percentage symbols here, and out here you want to then go ahead and in double curly braces refer to your attributes. So here we have title, description, created at. Now created at we can loop through, and it will automatically have data within it. Now you won't be able to see it in Django admin, but you will be able to see it in your template now. So we have title, and you need to refer to it by article dot. So you're going to say article dot title. And then you want to say article.description, and then you want to say article dot what was it again? Excuse me, created underscore at. All right, so you want to refer to it like that. And what we can do now is go ahead and run this. So you want to loop this through, run your server, and now you'll be able to see that object now on our index.html file. So that's how you can go ahead and return that data. So now if we refresh, we can now see we have that data here. Now this doesn't look the best, so what you can actually do here is you can actually just, for example, add in a breakpoint like this. Okay, that will help it a bit. And this just puts it on another line per se. Yeah, so if you refresh here, you can now see it has a line. Now you can add a double breakpoint here if you want an extra line in between, but we will format this and make it look a bit nicer, so you don't need to worry. So refresh, and there we go. So this is for our first object. You can also include the ID as well, since that's part of it. So article.id, and that's also something you won't necessarily see at first, but we know it exists because remember, in our migrations folder, it already prepped an ID for us. So we'll be able to access that as well. So now if we refresh, we can now see that's ID2. Because remember, the first object we had, we deleted. So just keep that in mind there. You can even say something now, so you can put HTML here and say something like, let's say article number, and you can close your paragraph tag. And now if you refresh, you can see you have something like article number or something like that. So we need to remove a breakpoint because by adding a paragraph tag there, it automatically adds some sort of spacing in. So we may not even need that breakpoint there. So you can just play around with that as you see fit. All right. Yeah, so that's how you can go ahead and return and render data. Now what we can do is actually add some formatting here. So I'm going to show you how you can do that. And then what I'm going to show you is how you can go ahead and select individual articles per se and view them. So that's something I'll show you in just a moment. But yeah, that's what we need so far. And what we're going to do next is we're going to actually just add some styling to this. So we'll add some bootstrap. So it's something extra that you'll learn. So that's something we'll want to go ahead and look into. Right. So what we want to do now is we just want to add some nice styling. So what we're going to do for now is we can remove this. Okay, so we now understand what's going on, and we can refresh and everything will be gone. Great. Okay, so what you want to do first of all is you want to add in some bootstrap. So I have a link here which you can see in the description below. So you want to go ahead and head over to getbootstrap.com, and we just want to add bootstrap and include the CDN here. So what you can do is just copy this CDN. So the first one that you have here, copy that, and you want to add this to your heading tag here and paste that right in like so. So that's all you want to add in. So you can add some space, make it look as nice as you wish. So that's what we need first. Next, we want to make use of a bootstrap card here. So this card here will allow our articles to look a little bit nicer when we are making use of them. So essentially what you can do is scroll down and you can see a style that you like, and you can read a little bit more about the details in terms of the images, the attributes, titles, text links. I won't go into detail with Bootstrap, but we just want to have a format structure like this. So what we can do is we can copy this structure. We can copy up to, let's see what we need. So we have the card, we can use up to, yeah, this is good. Or you can click here and copy, that's also well. And you can paste this in index.html so you can see the style. Now what I always like to do here is I just like to improve it a bit. It's a little bit too close together. So let's just add in some lines. And we have that. So let's refresh and see what that looks like. Okay, that's not too bad. Now that we have Bootstrap, it automatically adds in some styling for us there. So what we can do now is we can just remove that image there. We're not going to deal with images here. And we just have card body. So we're just playing around here for the moment. Great. Okay, that doesn't look too bad. Now, what we can also do now is we can just edit this up as we wish. So now we can put in our title and our description. And now this will act as our link to read the article. So essentially, we can just add in what we would like here. So what you can do now is add in your loop. So you want to loop through your articles again. Now, it's very important where you put it. So I would recommend that you add it. Let's see where we can add it. We can add it at the top right here. So you want to add that loop here. So we're going to say for article in articles. So remember again, this is the key that you reference to here in the green. So articles. And we can just indent this. So you can highlight this and you want to press tab on your keyboard just to indent it slightly so we can connect and end this for loop. So the for loop will end right here. like so. So that would be the for loop right there. So now if we refresh, okay, that's still working. Now you want to add in that data there. So now we can put in a title, we can put in the description, and what we can do here is we will deal with the link in just a moment. So in between this H5 tag here, you can just loop through. So in double curly braces here either side, we had with our models. Okay, we know that we had title, and we can add that. So we can say article.title here. So article.title. Then you want to have your description in between here. So we can copy that and highlight and delete. Now to make it easier on your screen, I'm just going to indent this here. And in between here, I'm just going to say article.description, like so. And we also need something for when it was created. So what I can say is just below the link here, I can add a breakpoint, and I can just add in a paragraph tag here with card text. I'm going to just borrow some markup here. And I know it's a lot of code, but not to worry, I will include the source code in the description below, so you can go ahead and refer to it. And here I'm going to say article.date created, or what was it called? Created at, sounds way off. Created at. Excuse me. So created at. All right, so we can see that's in place there. So just make sure you've got the structure in place here. So now if we refresh, we can see that's nicely in our, as we can see in our card. So we may need another breakpoint just below that link. There we go. Okay, that looks a bit better. All right, so that looks nice. Now you're probably wondering how it's going to look with multiple objects. So we can create another one in our admin page, for example. So what I'm going to do is I'll stop this for now. And what we need to do is head on to our admin.py. So just make sure and double check that everything is coherent and that you like how everything looks for now. And we're going to add in another object. And I just want to run the server and show you what I mean by that. So if we run another object, if we create another object in our admin page, so let's go to the admin page. And we're going to create another object. So this will be the third one we create. Go to blog posts, add article. Right, so I want to give it the name Java for beginners, and I'm going to say the best book ever. That's fine. Now we can save this object. So now as you can see, we have two objects. So what you can do is click on blog post here, and it will show those two articles, you could say. So what we can do now is log out, and you want to head on back to your local host. And there we go. We can see we have two articles. Now, what we want to do now is, let's say we want to go ahead and modify this a bit. So instead of go somewhere, I just want to change the text here to, let's say, view preview or something like that. So let's say someone wants to view a little bit more about this particular, you could say, this object. Now, what I want to do is, since they have a bit of a preview, I want to remove the description from here. So the preview part can be the actual description. So we just have the name. So just improving it a bit here. So what we can also then do is just add a breakpoint there. There we go. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to go ahead and create a dynamic URL. So when we click here on view preview, it's going to show us the description and a bit more information of this particular blog post, you could say, and also a little bit more information for this other blog post. So essentially, it's kind of like a blog post preview sort of site, you could say. And in between here, I just want to, yeah, we can keep it there. That seems quite decent. So to create that dynamic URL, we want to go to our models here. To our models, and let's evaluate. So title, description, created. All right. So we want to be able to go ahead and grab one of our individual records. So we can call these records or objects. So if I click on this object here, I want to go to that particular object. If I click on this object here, I want to go to this object. So to do that, we can create another view in views.py. And what we're going to say is we're going to say the following. So turn off your server, first thing you want to do. And we're going to create a function. You can give it any name you want. So I'm going to say def singular article, pass in the request object. And in here, I just want to say pass. Now, pass is a very useful keyword if we want to ensure we don't have any errors, and just keep the view in you could say, in limbo for the moment. Now we can head over to our URLs, and I just want to show you how we can create a dynamic URL. Now to do this, what we can do is we can just simply zoom in. We want to simply say pass. And then here with our first route name, we're going to give it a route name here. And I'm going to say article would be appropriate. And it's going to show article now in our URL. So it's going to be like /article. And then we want to say article, and then we want to put in, for example, the ID of that object. So if it was ID 3, ID 2, ID 5, now don't worry, the ID for you will be different because I did some testing, so I have different numbers. So generally speaking, it will be assigned to the ID of that particular object. All right. So that's essentially how we want to create a dynamic URL. So the first part here, article, is going to give it kind of a static URL, but once we add in the dynamic part, which is here, we need to add in these angle brackets. We can say int and :pk, and pk can act kind of like the dynamic URL part. And what you can do then is you can add in a / if you so desire, save comma views, and this will be linked to the view here that we have, which is singular article. So we can say not singular article, and the name here that you want to add in, you can just simply go ahead and put in quotes here, article. All right, that's all you need to add in. Just be sure at the end to add in a quote. Now we need to actually work on our logic. So here we can see this is a dynamic part of our URL, and the reason it's dynamic is because it will change. Because when we click, for example, here in view preview, it's going to take us to article 1, for example. If we click here for view preview for Java for beginners, it will take us, for example, to article 2. Right? And that's how it's going to work. So this is why it's a dynamic URL. So we can go back to our views and let's zoom out here a bit, and let's add in the logic. So we now need to pass in PK. So that will be like the placeholder. So the primary key, so the ID, and this is correlating to the PK that we have here because that's what we're going to add in. So essentially in the URL, when we say article, this is the PK, what we're grabbing. So we want to grab whatever is passed in the URL. So if it's 3 or 2, we want to grab the record that pertains to this ID. So this is the ID of that particular record, you could say. So that's essentially what we're doing here. So let's go back. Okay. And what you want to do here is in your views, you just want to go ahead and add in the logic. So we're going to say here article equals, and we're going to do another query. So we're going to do it on the article model and say article.objects.get, and we want to get the ID where it's equal to the primary key. So the value that we put in here would be denoted as PK, you could say, and ID here, we're looking for it in the database and comparing to what is requested here in the URL. So that's essentially what we're doing. We're comparing to see if it exists. Then we can create a context dictionary. And here in the value, I'm going to put in article, and the value, the key is going to be article. So this is what we reference in our HTML, and the article here will be different. Now, what we need to do now is create a separate page. So we're not going to use index.html anymore. We need to create another page. So for example, we can right click on links and create a new file, and I'm going to call this article.html. And here we can go ahead and just actually go ahead and copy this logic. Actually, we don't need to copy all this. What we can do is just keep it simple. So let's keep it simple for now. We add a doc type, HTML. We can add a header tag here if we wish. Add in the title. So we're just creating a new HTML page, and I'm going to say here blog post. And we can just leave it like that. Okay, we just need a HTML page, and it's going to be output accordingly onto our new page. So when we render now, so if we say return a render, we're going to pass in the request, excuse me, and here in quotes, we can pass in that particular HTML template, which will be links article.html, remember the parentheses, and then we can pass in this context dictionary by saying context is equal to context, and we're passing it through to this page here. All right. Now you're probably wondering, okay, how do we call this? How do we call all of this? Now the way that we can do that is we can head over to our article, to our index, excuse me, and here where we have where is it? The view preview here, this is a link. So we can redirect the link here accordingly, and we can go ahead and put the link according to this dynamic URL based on what is being looped here. So essentially, this will make sense. So all you need to do is you need to go ahead and alter this slightly. So we can go ahead and do just that. So here where we have our href, we can go ahead and alter this and say URL, and we can leave this. If it's an empty string, it's just going to redirect back here. Now remember what we did in our URLs, we reference this dynamic URL by the name of article. So we can say article. So in index, we can say article, right? And then outside, you want to go ahead and add in the ID for that article. So here we're referencing it by article right here. So we have article.title, article.created at, etc. Now we know from our migrations right here that we have an ID. So that's something we can pass through. So essentially we can just right next to it say article.id, and that's going to recognize it. All right. So if we click on this link now, so essentially if we click here, it will take us to the relevant link. All right. So what we can do now essentially is we can just simply run the server. Okay, and you want to refresh your page. And now if you hover over on them, you can see in the bottom left, there's a number in between because we're passing now that ID, and that ID is going to allow us to make use of a dynamic URL. And that number is going to fit in here nicely for that URL, which we constructed right here. So we're now passing in this ID. So this URL now can take in numbers. So it's a dynamic URL. Article was always part of it, and according to the name, that's why we set it right here. Now, before we move on, what we want to do now is head on to article now and actually add in the logic that we need. So in views, where we are outputting according to the singular article. So we're not looping through. So we can simply go to article, and here we can just put in double quotes as is. We can just put article.id. And here I'm going to say article.title, article.description, and article dot what was our model created at. Okay, and what you can also do is we can just say here what can we can add for example a heading for that article. You can say H2 for example, and a horizontal line. Oh, excuse me. And we can remove this ID. Let's put it down here. So remember, this is an article page. You don't need to put a loop because remember, you're only getting one record where it's equal. So one ID is only going to equal to one ID. You can't have two of the same numbers. So now if we refresh and we click here on view preview, it's going to take us to this particular article here. And what we can do actually is add in the breakpoints here. So in article right here, we can add in those breakpoints. There we go. There we go. All right, and this is for this article. We can go back, look at the next article or blog post, and we can see it there. And we can see the ID correlates to the dynamic URL that we specified in our urls.py file right here. So that's how it is being called accordingly. And we can also see we're calling the ID there as well, and we're calling it here, as you can see. All right, so that's how you can go ahead and make use of dynamic URLs, how you can pass them through. So remember here, if you're calling a singular instance, so one object, so in our views, we're only looking for one object, then in the HTML that we actually rendered to, we don't need to use a for loop. We can just add in literally, we can refer to the attribute in the double curly braces normally, unlike in index.html where we need to loop through it. And as you can see here, as we're looping through that article and the ID for that particular object that we have. So for this particular object, it's being looped through, and for this particular object, it's being looped through. All right, so there you go, guys. That's how you can make use of dynamic URLs, how you can render data, you can go ahead and make use of ORM. So here we're making use of the get method to go ahead and get a specific object. And here we're retrieving all objects by making use of the all method, as you can see here in place. All right. So that's it, guys. Just a bit of a quick crash course into Django. So you have an idea of some of the basic concepts and how to manage data, how to save them to a database, how to go ahead and loop through data, how to access that of particular instances of data, and to move on from there. All right, guys, so I will ensure that I add the source code link in the description below for GitHub, so you can go ahead and check that out accordingly. So yeah, that's it, guys, and as always, thank you for the support.